Discoveries, Essential Truth for Relationships. Chapter 7, Nurture Your Marriage. Focusing on the 80%. While out jogging in central Provo, Nancy and I found our dream house, a stately, historic craftsman-style house with a lovely lawn, arbor, carriage house, and playground. We were enchanted. We reworked our jogging path so that we passed that house every day. Often we walked around the house and peeked through the back fence just to see more of the amazing yard. We dreamed, we coveted. In a stroke of good fortune, one day there was a for sale sign in the yard. Breaking with all propriety, we went directly to the door and inquired. The friendly homeowner welcomed us and showed us to the house. It was all we had dreamed of. We were in love. We made an offer. We dragged our relatives over to see the house. A few weeks later, we closed on the sale. We now owned our dream house, our dream home. I remember leaving the closing with house key in hand. We drove directly to our new home. We unlocked the front door and stepped inside. I flipped the light switch and it exploded. After the initial shock, we laughed. We realized that we had created a fantasy home in which nothing would ever go wrong. The reality was different. The swamp cooler was inadequate in the summer. The old drains plugged up. The impressive carriage house left an unforgettable dent in our finances when we undertook to stabilize it. The thermostat was too close to the oven, so every time we baked, the furnace shut off. Then the boiler that heated the house broke down. The house was charming, but it required immense love and patience. Nancy and I have thought that there were great lessons for marriage to be learned from our experience with that house. It is easy to idealize and romanticize a relationship. It seems so perfect. Yet sometimes we forget the pains and the challenges of living in a fallen world. In this world, things just don't work right. We miscommunicate. We are more different from each other than we realize. We're focused on our own needs. Sometimes we're just cranky. As I have thought about marriage, I have estimated that most of us appreciate about 80% of our partner's characteristics. We love their kindness, consideration, unselfishness, and talents. Yet there are also those quirky preferences and tendencies that don't align with our own. Maybe there is a 20% margin of irritation in even the healthiest relationships. Yet nothing foretells the future of a relationship better than our focus. Do we dwell on the 20% that irritates us? Do we ruminate and recriminate? Do thoughts fester and fluster? Do we wish our spouses were different? Each day we make the vital choice. Will we gripe about the 20% or celebrate the 80%? Do we remember and cherish our spouse's strengths and goodness? When the inevitable irritations arise, do we keep them in perspective as small problems to be solved or accepted rather than as flaws that are unbearable? Are our souls filled with gratitude for the gift of love our spouses have granted us? Our relationship happiness depends in large measure on the single choice to focus on and cherish the good while minimizing and managing the bad. Let's talk for a minute about the 20% we don't like about our partner. We are tempted to focus our attention there because we hope to help our partner conquer some of their imperfection. That's a contract with misery. Gottman's estimate is that about 70% of what you don't like about your spouse will never change. It is part of who they are. Therapy won't remove it. Griping will only aggravate and harden it. You can be mad about it and dwell on it, but it isn't going to change. Can you see that this is a heavenly design for marriage? God is giving us a choice to make every day. He invites us to keep our focus on the abundant good rather than the marginal bad. Jesus' new commandment was that ye love one another as I have loved you. When we love the way Jesus loved, wholeheartedly, redemptively, relentlessly, our marriages are strengthened and we become more like him. He loves us in spite of our failings, and he asks that we do the same with our spouses. There is a catch in all this. If 70% of what we don't like will never change, what about the 30% of what we don't like that can change? We might be tempted to think, there's my opportunity. Nope. Gottman's research shows that the only way to get spouses to change is by loving and accepting them as they are. So when we focus on the 80% that is good, we get a small bonus. Our spouses will grow and become slightly better. When we focus on our discontent, we experience a total eclipse of the person, where their myriad of good qualities are overshadowed by the few that we don't like. We are filled with dissatisfaction, and the relationship suffers. That house in Provo surprised my wife and me with unexpected challenges, which in turn taught us vital lessons in patience and problem solving. The house's great qualities enriched our lives. Both the challenges and the good qualities were blessings to us. Would we buy the house again? Absolutely. It was a joy. We had inexpressible fun making the carriage house into a gathering place. The house was great for our family. We would buy the house again, even knowing what we know. The 80% of the house we loved made it a blessing to us. Learning your spouse's language of love. Dave Barry ironically observed that Americans who travel abroad for the first time are often shocked to discover that, despite all the progress that has been made in the past 30 years, many foreign people still speak in foreign languages. It's human nature to expect people to learn our language, to do things our way, to meet our needs. Nowhere is that more evident than in marriage. Despite decades of marriage, my wife, Nancy, has not recognized her life, personality, priorities around meeting all my needs. She is amazingly considerate and accommodating, but she still has her own preferences. She has not become another Wally or a servant to Wally. She is a unique person with her own strengths and her own inclination. She still speaks her own language. That is exactly how God designed marriage. We may care very much about each other, but God wants us to do more than settle comfortably into our own ways. He wants us to stretch beyond our egocentric preferences. He wants us to truly learn how to love. And as part of that assignment, he wants us to spend a lifetime learning someone else's language. We may one day speak it naturally and fluently, but without effort, we will hardly be able to communicate. You have probably heard of the languages of love, the idea that we all have different preferences for the way we give and receive love. Gary Chapman has written a popular book in which he lists these 5 love languages: words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. His book is good. I love the concept. Yet there is a system I like better that has 3 specific languages of love and 2 universal languages of love. Show me. I'm not convinced by words, but by actions. Tell me. I love words and messages of love. Touch me. I love to hug and snuggle. I find these 3 love languages easy to remember and simple to classify. Of course, most of us like to be loved in some mixture of these 3 languages. We want to see the actions. We value the words. We like to be held. We may value all 3 to some extent, but each of us likely places greater importance on 1 or 2. To add challenges to our relationships, our preferences may change over time. For example, sometimes we must cherish what is least available. Heavenly Father wants us to learn to pay attention to our partners and their needs on a continuing basis. In addition to the 3 specific languages, I sometimes add 2 universal languages, ways of expressing love that everyone desires. Understand me. Listen to my thoughts and feelings. Try to value them and make sense of them. Spend time with me. Join me in doing things I love to do. I wish I could say that I was a quick learner. The truth is different. Because I love stuff. For many years, I tended to give Nancy stuff. When I wanted to show her love, I would buy her a new dress or a lovely mixer. Yet I could tell that she wasn't excited to buy those gifts. She would be gracious, but I could tell that I wasn't speaking her language. After almost 3 decades of marriage, I decided to try a different approach. I asked myself, how does she like to receive and show love? What are the gifts Nancy has received that she most cherishes? What makes her feel loved? It was instantly clear to me that I had not been speaking her love language. She loves sincere notes. I decided to write her a note for Christmas. Having never been knowingly guilty of moderation, I decided to review the entire year and write to her about the sweet blessings we'd shared that year. It took a lot of time to review my records for the year and write a letter that covered all that time. I worked at it many hours. As Christmas approached, I printed out the 4-page letter on quality paper, put it in an envelope, and put it under our Christmas tree with my wife's name on it. When Christmas arrived, our youngest, Sarah, handed out the presents from under the tree. After a time, she got to the letter and handed it to her mother. Nancy was puzzled, but she opened it and read it. Sweetheart, I'm so grateful for the joyous experiences we have shared this year. Nancy had read only a few paragraphs at the letter when she began to cry. She turned to me and said, Wally, this is what I really want for Christmas. I instinctively responded, yes, dear, but there will be some great sales after Christmas. Despite my natural tendency to buy Nancy things, I am learning to love her in her language. She also likes me to help her in the yard. Of course, that is not what I prefer to do. Showing love requires sacrifice. It will always cost us to effectively show our love to another person. But if we wish to learn God's lessons of love, we must be willing to be stretched. The same principle of customizing our love applies to our relationships with our children, other relatives, and anyone to whom we convey genuine caring. To be effective, we must notice what matters to them. There is an exception to the rule of customizing expressions of love. In new relationships, we appreciate any evidence of interest. A half can of broken Pringles may touch our hearts at the beginning, but in a growing relationship, we begin to expect more of the other person. We expect that person to care enough to notice and to act in the ways that are meaningful to us. We, in turn, must care enough to notice and act in the ways that are meaningful to that person. This is the secret to loving others effectively, to love them in the way they prefer love. This stretches us. It challenges us to be more like the Savior, focused on the needs of others instead of focusing on your own convenience or preferences. God's advice for a happy marriage. In priesthood meeting, the teacher asked, what advice do you have for a successful marriage? The class responded, never go to bed mad. There are 2 key words for a happy marriage. Yes, dear. You should never fight or argue. There's no place like priesthood meeting to get terrible advice for marriage. Research says that what matters most in marriage is positivity. To be more specific, a healthy marriage needs 5 positives for each negative. A preponderance of kind words and deeds. All different kinds of relationships can flourish when the partners see and dwell on the good. But there is more. Sandra Murray, a prominent psychologist and relationship researcher, discovered that in the happiest marriages, partners see positive qualities in each other that no one else sees, not even best friends and lifelong family members. She calls these positive illusions. For example, my wife's Nancy's friends and families may see her as easy to get along with. As her husband, I see her as the kindest, most thoughtful person on the planet. But maybe these outstanding qualities aren't really illusions. Maybe in happy marriages, partners see deeply into each other's souls. Maybe they see underlying goodness that can be discerned only through eyes of love. I see what no one else sees in Nancy. I see her send notes, make calls, and visit people who are lonely. I see her express love to the sad. So I know Nancy better than anyone else. Yet there is more. I have made a covenant with God to see my wife more appreciatively than anyone else in life sees her. And seeing her that way has changed me. I think the Lord calls this kind of seeing pure knowledge. He recommends that we influence each other by kindness and pure knowledge, which shall greatly enlarge the soul without hypocrisy and without guile. When our perceptions of each other are filtered of earthly impurities, we see as heaven sees and are more likely to love as heaven loves. We are no longer guilty of the hypocrisy of seeing faults in our partners while ignoring our own narrow-mindedness and folly. Our perspective has changed, and we begin to act more kindly. While science recommends an emphasis on positive, God recommends a universal remedy for relationships: charity. There is nothing that strengthens relationships like the generosity of spirit that causes us to see the good in people and offer compassion in their struggles. This is the way Jesus sees us. Where would we be without his charity? And it is the way he invites us to see each other. I understand that most members of our priesthood group know little about the research on marriage, but I'm surprised we don't look to the gospel for answers more often. Doesn't the gospel of Jesus Christ teach us how to live together with love? After hearing many strongly expressed answers to the happy marriage question, the teacher observed, there is no one key. Every relationship is different. I see it differently. I think there is one key. It is the willingness to see, feel, and act as Jesus would see, feel, and act. It is called charity. How do we get charity? No prep rally will get us there. No nutritional supplement can provide it. There is only one source of this precious gift. Pray unto the Father with all the energy of heart, that you may be filled with his love, which he hath bestowed upon all those who are true followers of his Son, Jesus Christ, that you may become the sons of God. We cannot create charity in ourselves. We can make ourselves humble. We can withhold impatience and judgment. We can feel compassion for others. Then we must call on God with all the energy of heart for the heavenly gift of charity, which only he can give. Charity is the gift that changes everything, especially in marriage. Fostering meaningful connections. A husband and wife are working their way through the evening. At some point, he is using his phone to check on his favorite sports team. She turns to him and sighs, I'm so tired. The average husband would react based on his own tiredness rather than entering her world and understanding her meaning. He might, with the best of intentions, say, yeah, I'm tired too. I had a lot of pressure today. Or he might say, I know just how you feel. Or he might say, you've been tired all week. Why don't you go lie down? Can you see what's wrong with these responses? Read them again. All three responses to the wife's tiredness focus on the husband, his day, his knowledge, his recommendations. All three responses fail to enter his wife's experience. In the chaotic traffic of family life, we often honk at and zoom past each other. We hardly even notice the people who matter most as we try to navigate our way towards our own goals. We notice when they get in our way, but we rarely think about where they are headed. Imagine that the husband set aside his own thoughts and reactions on his phone in order to tune into his wife. Imagine that rather than talk about his own experience, he invited her to tell more about hers. Tell me about your day, dear. It sounds like you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders. You sound burdened. This would be different from our usual advice giving? No. How would this be different from our usual advice giving? It makes all the difference when family members feel heard and taken seriously and feel connected to us. Dean calls this validation. How often do we notice our spouse's invitation to enter into her world? Our wife or husband may give only a sigh, a shrug, or a look, yet people are always making bids for connection. John M. Gottman defines bids for connections as follows. A bid can be a question, a gesture, a look, a touch, any single expression that says, I want to feel connected to you. A response to a bid is just that, a positive or a negative answer to somebody's request for emotional connection. Our spouses are trying to connect to us. They are inviting us into their lives. Most of the time, we fail to respond because we are busy or distracted. Gottman calls this turning away. We drive past without acknowledging our spouse at all. Sometimes we do worse than turning away. Sometimes we turn against our spouse and his or her bid for connection. Maybe a child asks for help with homework, or a spouse asks for a minute of time. It is common for us to snap, I don't have time for that. We may wonder how they could be so thoughtlessly imposed on our busy lives, yet we fail to notice the real invitation. You are important to me. I need your help. I hope I can count on you. Will you join me? Imagine a couple relaxing in a room overlooking a beautiful bay. The wife is enjoying the view and the husband is reading the paper. The wife, standing at the picture window, declares, "Oh, what a beautiful sailboat." The husband may turn away, either ignoring her entirely or glancing and shrugging his shoulders as if to say, "What are you so excited about?" Or he may turn against her. "That sailboat is a piece of junk. What's wrong with you? Don't you know anything?" Unfortunately, we often develop a crabby habit of mind. When someone offers an invitation to connect, we respond with criticism and complaint. This is especially common with family members. We effectively belittle the person who has invited us into his or her life. We can imagine how these responses will impact the relationship. The wife is not very likely to trust or share with her husband when he responds indifferently or harshly. She will not feel close to him. She is often met with such a response. If she is often met with such a response, she may stop trying altogether. Fortunately, there is another alternative, turning toward. Such a response requires that we be fully present humans, that we recognize that the wife was almost surely not saying, "Based on years of observation, I would guess that particular sailboat is in the top 20% of seaworthiness of those that I've seen." No, she was saying something very different. Maybe she was saying, "It is so nice to have leisure time in a pretty place. I love the view. I love being with you." A bonding response requires that we look beyond the objective truth about sailboats and consider the message about relationships. Most things people say and do are invitations to connect. Imagine her husband responded to her comment sensitively. "The view is lovely. This place is peaceful, and I'm glad to be with you." That is turning toward her. Turning toward someone sends a powerful and positive message. It says, "You're important to me. I'm glad you're in my life." Turning toward does not necessarily mean going along with. Many a time I have invited Nancy to go to Home Depot with me, and she might well say, "Why would I go to Home Depot?" That would be turning against. But she doesn't say that. Even if she can't go with me, she is likely to say something like, "Thank you for inviting me. I love going places with you. But this evening I'm crazy busy. Will you invite me again the next time you go?" When people invite us into their lives, we should be gracious in our response, even if we decline the invitation. Even a polite and heartfelt rain check can convey care and affection. And many times we will find that we can join our loved ones in their lives if we will simply notice the invitation they regularly offer us. 3 kinds of relationships. In 25 years of marriage, my wife and I have never fought. We have never even raised our voices at each other. The rest of the brethren in our priesthood quarrel hung our heads. It was likely that none of us could say the same thing. The man continued, "Both of us know that we want the best for each other. So if anything my wife says hurts my feelings, I know I have misunderstood her." Many of us have wanted to be this kind of spouse, but haven't been as successful with managing our mouths and our hearts. At times, I have been discouraged when I compared myself to husbands like the one in priesthood meeting. But I feel differently now. Research by John Gottman shows
that there are three kinds of relationships, each of which can be enduring and satisfying. The key to a happy and successful relationship is understanding the strengths and challenges of the relationship and then choosing to emphasize the positive. Let's compare relationships to boats. Ski boats are very popular, but some people love sailboats and other people prefer canoes. Each type of boat has advantages and limitations. Each can provide joy to the people traveling. While a canoe is unable to pull water skiers, it is better than a powerboat to peacefully navigating streams. What are the three kinds of relationships and what are their strengths and challenges? Number one, the first kind of relationship is validating. Gottman observes that in a validating marriage, couples compromise often and calmly work out their problems to mutual satisfaction as they arise. The couple described at the beginning of this chapter was a validating relationship. They enjoy great peace and harmony, and they work well together. There are also challenges. The calm negotiating style can make the wife and husband relatively passionless, more like a business partnership than a marriage. Just as a canoe is perfect for those who want to peacefully travel waterways, a validating relationship may be just right for people with the disposition for negotiation. To prevent the relationship from becoming passionless, Gottman offers several suggestions, including enhancing romance. The second kind of relationship is volatile. Partners argue passionately for their points of view. Husband and wife are open, honest, and lively. The relationship is exciting, but you can see the challenge. Partners can hurt one another with their honesty and directness. The objectives for volatile relationships is to keep steady amidst the high winds of their passion, that they can be quite a balancing act considering the frequent storms they subject themselves to. But as long as they hold on tight, they are likely to experience many years of joy and positive intensity. Volatile relationships may be like ski boats. They are fun and nimble, but when carelessly driven, they can injure people. To manage a volatile relationship, Gottman recommends that partners express plenty of interest in and appreciation for each other, that they choose politeness, show affection, and use care when teasing. The third kind of relationship is avoidant. While validating couples negotiate differences and volatile couples confront differences, avoidant couples sidestep. They would rather leave some issues unsettled than have unpleasantness. As Gottman explains, they reaffirm what they love and value in the marriage, accentuate the positive, and accept the rest. In this way, they often end an unresolved discussion still feeling positive about one another. This is good for peace, but can be challenging for companionship and intimacy. Maybe avoidant couples are like sailboats. They peacefully cut through the waves and are the picture of serenity. Like all relationships, the avoidant type has its vulnerabilities. Gottman recommends that avoidants pay attention to their feelings and find ways to share needs and concerns. For decades, many therapists and educators encourage every couple to have validating relationships. This was bad news for those of us with volatile or avoidant relationships. It seemed we had to change our very natures and surrender our trademark qualities in order to become good spouses. Gottman's research opened mind to different ways of successfully being together. He found that all three kinds of relationships are likely to be enduring and satisfying in their own unique ways, as long as there is a preponderance of positives in the relationship. And that is the good news. We can still be ourselves and be in good marriages. Gottman's research has one recommendation for all couples: dwell on the good. Find five positives for each negative. This corresponds with the thing the Lord has always taught. He does not mandate a certain communication style or personality type. He does, however, command that we love the way he loves, generously, unstinkingly, and unselfishly. We can use our strengths, manage our weaknesses, and look for the good. That is the way to have a great relationship. Invitation. 1. As you read the words above, what ideas and impulses stirred within you? Do you feel an impulse to be more kind and forgiving? Write down some of your favorite qualities about your partner and choose to reflect on those this week. 2. Think about your spouse. What expressions of love would be most meaningful to him or her? Are there ways that you can better customize your message of love? Experiment. Try showing love in a way that you think your spouse will appreciate. Be willing to keep experimenting until you have mastered their language of love. The next time you are irritated with your spouse, instead of using all the energy of heart to build resentment or anger, redirect that energy into praying to feel charity for your spouse. 4. Pay careful attention to your spouse and notice his or her bids for connection. Be prepared to turn towards him or her. 5. Your relationship may be different from any relationship you've idealized. Look for the strengths in your own relationship and dwell on those as you work through the challenges.